Okay, so let me share my screen. Just let me know once you can see my screen.
Yes, Jackie, we can. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So guys, today's we like everyone welcome to 22nd Surat MuleSoft Meetup. And in today's session, we will going to discuss about API-led connectivity integration pattern. So what are the different integration pattern can be supported by API-led connectivity? And Mary Joy Sabal, MuleSoft ambassador, and like she will be the speaker for meetup. She had already talked in the previous Surat MuleSoft meetups and MuleSoft connects and partner kickoff meetups. Yeah. So organizer like me and so myself Jitendra Bhafna and Nitish, like would you like would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure,
Hello
Jackie.
Nitish.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Jackie. Hi, everyone. I'm Nitish Jain, consultant at IBM. I'm certified developer and integration architect. And welcome all on Saturdays so early. Welcome all.
So now I will ask Mary to take this session from here. So Mary, you can share your screen and like just I will unshare my, so you can start with the session.
Yep. Thanks, Jack. 1 second.
Let me unpresent it first.
Cool. Can you see now my screen?
Yes.
Which one do you see? The presenter mode or
Yeah, we can see in presenter mode.
okay, cool. So
Both the screens.
sorry,
Both the screens.
both the screens.
Yeah, the next slide as well.
Oh, hang on. Um, how about that?
No, Mary, it's like two screens.
Display settings. Swap. How about that?
That's good now.
Awesome. Cool. So good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for taking time from your weekends to join in. So I really appreciate it. And thank you so much again, Jackie, for the opportunity of speaking again in Surat. Um, yeah, so good morning. Have you had breakfast yet? So it's 4:30 p.m. here in New Zealand. So today I'm gonna talk about the API-led integration pattern. So for anything else, I'm Mary Joy Sabal. You could call me Joy. So I'm working as integration practice lead, specializing in MuleSoft for Datacom New Zealand. So I look after the MuleSoft accounts here in New Zealand, across New Zealand, apart from Wellington. Um, I've got 10 years IT experience. My background it was COBOL and Java before I got into integration space. And yeah, so I frequently speak in meetups and MuleSoft conferences. I write blogs as well for Mule. So if you have time, feel free to check it out. And I run as well the Wellington meetup group, and I'm currently looking after um, 8 MuleSoft developers, so technically and commercially as well. Cool. So today, I'm gonna talk about the different API-led integration patterns. We're not gonna have a demo today because primarily the target audience are architects, but it's good to know that the developers should be familiar and aware of this as well. And I've squeezed in the queue specific exception handling as well because it's really good knowledge. And yeah, key takeaways. So I'm not going to cover all the different API-led integration patterns. So I've excluded couple or like 3 integration patterns. But yeah, so let's get started. So if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or drop your questions in the chat. And after this, you're gonna get a survey email. So it would be good if you could put some comments because it's a good way to better ourselves as well, like in the future presentations. We'll really appreciate, like, if it's good or bad, like, it's fine, or even if you just say thank you, that's still okay. Okay, so first integration pattern is the Synchronous API. So this session, we're not gonna take long because I wanna like set aside time for questions as well. So yeah, so going back to the Synchronous API, so this integration pattern is the simplest among all the integration patterns. So this session, we're assuming that you've already familiar with the API led. So API led, as you know, we've got the system, process, and experience layer. So in here, this synchronous API integration pattern is not recommended for longer lived transactions. So this is how it's gonna look like in an API design. So we've got API for system, process, and experience. But the process API, it's mainly just for abstraction layer. Um, and it contains like a bit of business logic. That's why I've said that this is not recommended for longer lived transactions, in the reason why that we don't want to break the SLA of the original consumer. So as much as possible, like, less business logic for this kind of approach. So yeah, so for example, we've got the system API here. That API, of course, enable the data out of the downstream service.
Hello, hi Joy. I think there's some problem at your side, internet connectivity issue with the, can you please check? Like, we are not able to hear you properly. Just give me a 2 minute. Let me inform her. Rejoin. So give me some time.
Hello?
You.
Did
Yeah.
everyone dropped? Or is
No, no, no. We
We
are
are
there
here.
only.
Don't worry, Joy.
okay. Sorry guys. So where what was the last slide deck that you
It
saw?
was I think it was the first slide only. So yeah,
Alright, let me
Second one, in fact.
second one, right?
the
Yeah.
Yeah.
second integration pattern. Alright.
Synchronize something.
Alright. Okay. Anyway, I'll just share my screen again.
And the video as well.
Yep, sorry. Alright. Cool. Yeah, it's a bugger. Debbie. Okay. Right. So you can you see my slides now?
Yes, yes, Joy.
Awesome. Alrighty. Okay. So yeah. So going back to this one, right?
A previous one?
The previous one. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
this one. Yeah.
All right. Okay, so from the top, yeah. So first integration pattern, API-led integration pattern is the synchronous API. So this pattern is completely stateless. So if you're aware with the API-led approach, we've got three layers: system, process, and experience. But the process API in this case is just used for an abstraction layer. So it performs a minimal business logic, and this integration pattern is not recommended for longer lived orchestrations. So why are we talking about different API-led integration patterns? Because this approach is like a formula for us, since we are, in an integration space, we are dealing with different systems, different exchange of messages. So it's good that, we've got this formula on how we're gonna design everything. So that's why we've got this API-led integration pattern. So this synchronous API, this is how it's gonna look like. In the diagram. So in here, the process layer, it should be minimal logic only. So no longer live transactions. Why? Because we don't want to, break the SLA of the original consumer. So if we keep on extending the process layers, process APIs logic, then it's just gonna be, it's gonna affect the SLA. So this is really straightforward. So next one is the synchronous API with orchestration. So the only difference of this pattern is the process API actually orchestrating the underlying business logic, the system APIs. So in the previous diagram, you could only see one system API, but here it's gonna have like two or more multiple system APIs. So there are two types how we're gonna do that from our process API. First is sequencing, if that's the requirement, using the choice router. And the second one is in parallel, which we're gonna use the scatter gather. Right. Cool. So in the diagram, so ignore the header. That should be synchronous API with orchestration. So in here, we've got two system APIs, the motor policyholder search and the home policyholder search. So in here, the problem is like, okay, we want to retrieve the customer details or the account details from different interfaces or different tables, for example. So in here, you could perform a scatter gather approach because, there's no requirements to make it sequentially. So you could search in parallel from those two system APIs. And then the process layer would perform the business logic. So that's the only difference from the previous integration pattern. All right. So the third one, this is the Synchronous API with caching. So if you've attended my previous meetup in New York, I've talked about the different caching strategy in MuleSoft. So I like this approach because we place the caching in the process layer. So what's the reason why we place it there? So we make sure that the system layer always gets the real-time update from the downstream service. So this is applicable if you are dealing with retrieval of, same informations like get request. Yeah, so we're making sure that we always get the fresh copy of data from the system layer. So just a brief background with the caching. So the caching, it's either scheduled, so you could do that via scheduler, um, and then so you could tweak that in the runtime manager. There's a scheduler there. The other one is using the object store, which has the time to live. So time to live means like when you like to, to wipe out the cache and, retrieve the fresh copy. So the object store, we've got two types. We've got the in-memory object store. And so in memory object store, once the API has been restarted, then the cache will get wiped out. But in the persistent one, which we save, on the disk, even if you restarted, the data will not gonna be lost and will be persisted up to 30 days. So the only thing that it it gets wiped out is when you delete the API in runtime manager, for example. So that's when the persistence gonna yeah gonna get wiped out. So here, I just grab the diagram that I've created from my previous presentation in caching. So here, the API consumer sends a request, and then the Mule API will process the transaction. So we've got two types of the caching. One is the caching in the API manager level, which is one of the policies. And the second one is using the cache scope inside the Mule implementation. So
Joy, we have few questions. We take it now.
yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So there is a question: how the cache will be invalidated?
Right. Yeah. So I'm already. So this is the answer. You could pass a header, so that is configurable in HTTP caching policy in runtime manager. So you could pass your own header, and then if you pass that from the request, then it will invalidate the cache. Yeah,
Okay.
there's a specific header.
Why why don't we have a caching strategy at the system API?
Because we want to get the fresh copy of data, Jack, from the system API. So that's
Correct.
why it's placed in the process API. Because, if we place it there and there are updates going on in the downstream where we can't get the fresh one, we can get the fresh copy. So that's the reasoning behind why it's placed in the process API.
Yeah. So these are the only two questions. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, which actually just which actually good reasoning, to place it in the process API layer than the system API. Okay, so yeah, going back to the caching process in Mule, if you haven't tried it, so yeah, the consumer sends requests, and then it will process the transaction. And in here, we've got, for example, a cache scope inside your Mule API. So there's a so-called conditional caching. So in conditional caching, again, that's a header that you pass from your request. So if there's no cache control, or no cache in the header, then the next one is if it's payload, if it's a repeatable. And then if it's repeatable, then it will generate the key. So the the caching in Mule, it's actually binded in object store. That's why we are still dealing with key value pairs here. So if the key is existing, um, so if the key is not existing, then store it to the object store. So this is what we call the cache miss concept. So if it's existing, otherwise, if it's existing, then retrieve the key from the object store, which is what we call cache hit. So we've got two types here, cache miss and cache hit. And then, but if, if again, the time to live has been expired, then that would be a cache miss. So you have to be careful in setting time of this time to live. I think the time to live that you could specify is only in persistent mode. Is that correct, Jack? So in the object store, and there's a
Yes.
default only for the in memory. So there's a default value in memory, and then in the object store v2. So by the way, another fact is so we've got object store v1 and v2. So the v2, you could specify the time to live, but the v1, no, you can't do that. So that's one of the big change in the object store. Cool. So now going back to the process, the key, you could specify your own key. You could let the object store to generate with, I think it's using SHA-256. That's the default as far as I remember. And then you could have your own custom Java code on how you're gonna, generate your own key. So there are three ways to do that. But yeah, I'm not gonna go further in the caching. So just check my previous meetup in New York. Yeah, so that's how it works. And then once there's it's existing from the object store, then you're going to return that response. So in that way, you save the bandwidth, you save the processing power because you're getting it from the cache. And this is only applicable for the transaction that's not frequently changed. So you have to consider as well if you really gonna use or if the caching is fit on the use case. Cool. All right. Do you have any questions, Jeff? I can't see the chat.
Yes, Joy, we have two questions.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay. If the API is deployed on RTF with multiple replicas, how caching will be implemented?
Okay, this is a big problem with the RTF. I I heard and I saw that there are issues implementing because it's not really the caching, it's actually the object store in RTF that is making an issue. But but I recommend that if you not use this caching in an RTF wherein there are multiple consumers that accessing same object store or same key.
And also, I would like to add something like in a runtime fabric, like we cannot create a persistent. Like there is a no
Yes.
possibility where we can create a persistent object store. Like in case your application restarted or your application gone down
Mhm.
and it try to start it again, in that
Mhm.
case you will lose all your data in object store. So
Yeah.
what I will suggest, instead of that, you can use some external casing, so that is also one of the possible way, but it will not make more sense basically when you are using the
Mm.
external case because you have to do
Yeah.
an extra call basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Even so, it's always in memory in RTF. There's no persistent. Even the clustering, right, Jack? RTF with clustering, it's always in memory too.
Yeah, but in clustering we can enable JDBC also. So there is an option where we can enable a JDBC kind of object. Like we can enable the persistent also, like using JDBC. But for runtime fabric, it's not possible at all. Like it's
Yeah.
completely not possible.
Yeah, so we've got customer that has the same issue, but they use Redis. Is that Redis for to handle this caching? So external tool, not the out of the box Mule caching policy, because they are, having some issues with that.
Correct, correct.
All right.
Joy,
So
I have
now,
a question.
yep, go ahead.
Okay, so in order to keep the cache updated, so
Mhm.
okay, it's a time to live, and then we have to periodically update the cache. So can it be made other way around, so that whenever there is any insert or update to the database, for example, then
Mhm.
the cache is updated automatically, the other way around, the
No,
initiation from the backend system, just
no,
to recognize whether the data is updated and added, and then you're forced to update your cache.
no,
Is it
because
possible?
because the API, the Mule API in the caching doesn't know what's happening from the downstream. So this is triggered via API invocation, right? So we're not polling. We're not polling from the downstream. We're actually invoking the system API. So no, I that's not doable.
Maybe a separate flow, wherein we have a new table, new data table, sort of any record added, and then that flow triggers, and then update the cache.
I think in that case, if your downstream, for example, have a mechanism for triggers, 'cause like Salesforce, there are Salesforce triggers, right? So
Hmm.
if there's like a change on that, then push that to a queue. That's what I could see on that. That's what I yeah. So push that on the queue, and then so that would be the producer, and then your Mule API, that's gonna be the consumer of that change. So in that way, you're making sure that it's a real time change coming. If you set triggers from the downstream, that's gonna be a different pattern.
Okay, right. Thank you, Joy.
Yeah, cool. Um, anything else,
No,
Jack?
no, like we are good, I think.
All right, cool. So we're good with synchronous API with caching. Right. So next pattern is the synchronous API, synchronous fire and forget async push. So in here, we've got a broker now. So that's in the messaging layer. So I just gave Solas as an example here. So in here, we've got the experience layer, and that experience layer actually, receives the request. For example, creating a customer account for multiple downstream services like SAP, Salesforce, and just a native database. So the problem statement is once the users has been created, we want to push the changes in the different downstream services. So this is where we're going to use um, the the message layer. So I'm gonna break this down into three parts so I could explain it properly. So the first one, we're gonna talk about the integration layer, which is our experience API. So this is responsible for the incoming messages, and it will determine as well, like if these messages are for create, for update, or for whatever purpose. And then when it comes to the sequencing is the source system responsibility, not the integration layer. And then the layer's responsibility is just to make sure that the sequencing has been consistent and honored and or handled from the integration layer. So that's for the experience API. And then the next layer is the messaging layer. So in here, we've got a topic, and then in Solas, when you've got topic, you could push that into multiple queues, and that multiple queues would be consumed by different system APIs, which I'm gonna talk about after this slide. So Yeah, so the broker configuration will allow the message to be received by multiple consumers, queues, that is subscribed to a topic. So in the queue processing, we'll have to make sure a guaranteed delivery of the message. So that's the goal for this use case. So so there are two types of quality of service when it comes to event brokers. One is direct delivery, which is fire and forget, without without checking what's happened, did it went through properly. And the second one is the guaranteed delivery, which is store and forward. So in the case of Solas, they use the guaranteed delivery by using or configuring the broker with a disk for storage. So they are saving the event in a disk just in case something went wrong. They could do a message replay on that. But downside of this performance issue, yeah, performance degrade. And then the other thing is so to use the guaranteed delivery is queue, there's a queue that acts as a virtual endpoint to store the events. So that's for the guaranteed delivery. I'm gonna talk more about the guaranteed delivery when we get to the queue exception handling.
Uh, Joy, we have a few questions.
Yep.
So the first question is how to avoid duplicate message processing in this pattern.
All right. So there's the acknowledge mode that I'm going to talk about in the queue exception handling. So the acknowledge mode, hang on, let me just share that. Because in JMS we've got a different acknowledge mode. So auto, and then immediate, and then manual. So in auto you could configure if you are accepting a duplicate. So it's like dupes underscore okay, something like that. So you could yeah, you could check that in the MuleSoft docs, but there's a configuration on that to avoid the duplicate messages. Yeah, to control the duplicate messages.
And the second question is like how to maintain sequencing at a consumer end.
Um, so that's a very good question. My take on that is you could actually because the thing in JMS is it doesn't, the downside, it doesn't, it's not good in the sequencing. What you could do for me is you could introduce an ID. I don't know. What's your thoughts with that, Jack? To make sure.
We can make it a FIFO queue also, right? First in, first out, like where it will maintain the sequencing,
FIFO.
right?
Yep. Yep. That's a very good question. All right. Anything else? Any questions? So the app is from consumer side. Yeah, in JMS there it's in the MuleSoft doc. You could check the acknowledgement mode, more details of acknowledgement mode. Cool. Right.
Then like we can have a discussion after this meetup, like so we can take your query after the particular meet, after the session.
All right. Yep. Welcome, Montan. Thanks for your time. All right. So next part of the synchronous fire and forget pattern is where's my 1 second. All right. So we've got a target specific queue receiver. So we're now at the system layer. Okay. So in here we've got a different. So here our Mule APIs are consumers. Okay, so the messages, that's why we've got different queue for each target system, is because first we wanted to maintain the sequencing, and of course different system, most likely they have different formats of the messages. So that's why we've got a single queue per target, and also to make sure that we handle all the operations specified in our integration layer. Cool. All right. So here, we've got a business requirement. So the source system requires the external IDs to be stored in the source system as well. So we've got here a separate queue that is intended for correlation processing. So we've already created the customers or the accounts into SAP, into Salesforce, and in the in the native database. And most likely we will get an ID in return to to know that okay, it's good, we've created it, this is the ID. So we could bind that ID in the correlation ID that's been passed from the source system. So you could pass it, for example, as a header, like an X correlation ID header, and then pass it all the way to the system API. And then once the ID from the downstream system has been created, you could bind that from the X correlation ID, from the object that you've just created, and then push that to this queue. So this queue is intended only for correlation processing. All right. Yeah, because there are some requirements that okay, we need that ID so that make sure that we could reference it in the future, or make sure that the account has been created successfully. All right. So any more questions from the fire and forget pattern?
Okay, so how would you intimate consumer if failures happen?
What do you mean by intimate consumer?
So basically, it's sick. Mohit, like why JMS will like intimate consumer, right? The consumer will intimate JMS broker, like something got failure while processing, right?
No, my question is that from the front end, I've sent the message and it is being now processed in the back end. So if some failure happens, how the consumer will get to know whether this message got processed successfully or not?
No, in that case, like if consumer is not able to pick the message from queue, right? The consumer will never come to know like something goes wrong, and like if publisher try to publish the message into the see, it's not like that. Let's consider the example, a simple example. I have a queue and publisher trying to publish the message to queue, and while publishing
No,
the
no,
message to queue.
yeah, my so sorry, maybe I put it wrong. So consumer is not in the sense. So I'm at the front end side. I call experience API, okay, and
Hmm?
and the request goes downstream in a fire and forget fashion.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I got it. So in that case, there is a concept of callback URL basically, right? So basically, like sometime what happens, let's consider like we got the request on the experience API. The experience API is the HTTP endpoint, correct? So we got request there from experience API. We process API queue, right? So it done the processing. Then the process API queue put the request in the system API queue. So that is all fire and forget. Like we already sent the acknowledgement to Express API, like we have received the request and we are doing the processing, right? But we haven't sent the technical response, just a functional response. Basically, we have just sent the technical acknowledgement saying uh, we are okay, we have done your processing. But your question is valid. In case if we are using the fire and forget, what will happen? Like in that case, there is a possibility we can make use of like response queue. Like after processing, we can send the message to response queue, and like some of the like other process will pick the message from response queue and send the acknowledgement to the consumer basically, or to the to the experience API consumer. So there is a concept of callback URL, right? So we require some concept of callback URL also, where we can like in case if they want the functional response back, we can send it back. Ole? Hello, hello, can you hear me?
Yes. I actually just rejoined. I don't know. I got disconnected.
You might have you got what have you got the answer basically?
Not the entire.
I thought
So basically, like his question is like that, like we have a experience layer, and like somebody will send the request to the experience layer, right? But
Mm-hmm.
after experience layer, like process API and the system API are the queue base, are the listener base, right? So like how we will send the response back to the consumer, functional response back. So like so like what happened to that particular message, like let's consider the in e-commerce. So basically we receive the orders basically, right, through some experience layer. We receive the order, like somebody have order something on like via mobile or like via web application. So we receive that order. Once we receive that order, we place that order into queues, right? After that it does payments and everything, like it check the inventories and everything in the backend. And the finally, like we need to send the status back to the to the consumer, basically the first consumer, like so in that case what we can do, either the consumer will keep on sending the status, will keep on asking for status, right? So that's a one way. The second way, it can be like we can send the response back to the callback URL, like after the
Mm-hmm.
complete processing.
Yep,
That's a two way, right?
correct. That's correct. So it's gonna be a
Why?
request reply. Yeah.
Mohit, your question is very valid. Like generally, in case of when you are when you are ordering on Amazon or like any website, right? So like order processing happen asynchronously in the backend. Like it does payment, it does inventory check, then it send the message to like like Oracle Transform Management, and then it
Mm-hmm.
also send the message to shipping, shipment, and all those things, right? So all these things happen at the backend. But
Mm-hmm.
like experience API keep on getting all the, if you see in Amazon, you get all the status, right? Where is your order now? It has been dispatched, it has been packed, those kind of thing, it has been saved, right? So this all happens asynchronously, basically, like so there might be some kind of API, where consumer can check the status of its order, or there can be a concept of callback URL. But I will go with the first option, where we can provide the URL to the consumer. He can keep on checking the status of that. Mohit.
Yeah. So and also so you could publish the successful transaction here in a queue, and there would be another API, consumer API, that would, you could call like an HTTP call to check, if the message or yeah, if the message or the
Yeah,
transaction is successful.
yeah, I got it. So, in the first time, the consumer will get like order accepted response, and then he will check this.
Yeah, so it's a technical response. Later on he will get the functional response, like he himself check for the functional response, or either we can send it to callback URL. It depends, like
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. So the next one is the asynchronous publisher and subscriber. So the only difference of this is this is invoked, the integration layer or the experience process layer is invoked by or not actually invoked. It's getting it from a queue as well, or a topic. So that's why it's asynchronous, and the rest would be the same approach from the one that I've discussed earlier. All right. So now let's get to the queue specific exception handling. I've included this because it's really interesting, most especially when you are dealing with event driven architecture. So the problem statement is, yeah, we need to make sure that the messages, or yeah, so the guaranteed message delivery. So from the producer side, we have to make sure that messages that are placed on the queues are persisted. And then on the consumer side, um, the yeah, I'm just checking if that I'm not disconnected. Okay. Yeah, so on the consumer side, we'll have to make sure that there's no message loss. All right. So in Solas, what I've discussed is they're using a mechanism. They could store it in the disk, or they could have a virtual queue endpoint. And then the sub requirements, the other requirements is, first is the acknowledgement of the queue message. So that's the one I was saying. That's a matter of configuration. So we've got different acknowledgement mode. And then the second one is the exception handling of the queue receiver. So we have to be able to differentiate between the business and the technical exceptions. So the queue receiver processing, so has the capability to configure deliveries in the event of an exception. So what's the difference between technical exception and the business exception? So in error handling as well, we inside the Mule API, we categorized our errors between technical and business. So this is the same thing here. In technical, this is an exception. For example, where the target system is not available, or there's, for example, connectivity issue, retry, exhausted. So yeah, which is actually where it makes sense to attempt redeliveries. So we have the retry and the frequency of retries. So we could use the until successful in our Mule API, or there's a configuration. For example, the web service consumer has the reconnection strategies as well. Okay, and then the business exception. This is primarily data related, and there's no sense of redelivering it unless somebody's gonna take a look on it and see what went wrong, what's wrong with the data, and then proceed with the reprocessing. So those that is the difference between the business and then the technical exceptions. All right. So now the exception handling routine. So how are we gonna handle this kinds of exceptions? Oh, hang on. So this is the business exception, which I was talking about. Did I miss something? All right. Yeah, knew it. I'm missing one slide. Okay. Right. So technical exceptions and if your deliveries are not exhausted, so you still have, for example, 5 retries. It's not yet exhausted. You'll have to do is to log the error and then retry the transaction. So I think you need to log the error just to see, what happened after the first try, after the second retry, third, and so on. And then the technical exception, if the redeliveries are exhausted, so you could see the Mule retry exhausted error, is for you to log the error and then place the original message in a dead letter queue and then acknowledge the original message. So it's saying, okay, we've delivered it, but something went wrong. So we're pushing the message to dead letter queue. And then last is the business exception. This could be data related, like a schema validation. So what you'll do is you have to log the error and then place the original message in a poison queue and acknowledge the original message. All right. So you're wondering, what's the difference between a poison queue and the dead letter queue? So poison queue is like what I've said, if it's a business exception, that is, something that somebody should take a look at. Like, are there any, are we missing data or, something that is data related? So in that way, they could, reprocess it, like a message replay concept once they've fixed the error. So that is for poison queue. And the dead letter queue is the messages that will not be handled because there's no sense of reprocessing it. So you're not going to do any reprocessing it. That's why in the dead letter queue. So potentially, there are messages from poison queue that you can transfer to dead letter queue as well. So that's the difference between the poison queue and the dead letter queue. All right. So any questions so far, Jack?
Yeah, there is a question: when will message go to poison queue and dead letter queue?
So if it's a business exception, you'll put it in a poison queue. If it's a technical exception, you'll place it in a dead letter queue. So business exception could be business validation logic from user requirements or data issue. Yeah. And technical exception be related in, for example, connectivity, retry exhausted, timeouts. Yeah. So the business exception, there's no point of retrying because, for example, if it's data related and it's throwing, it's a data issue, there's no point of retrying because that would be the same message that you're gonna fire. But so in that way, there's no point of retrying. So you have to put it in a poison queue, and then somebody will, take a look at it and see what's wrong with that message, and then once they fix that, they could replay the message. But for the technical exceptions, yes, you have to do a retries. But there's, for example, the retries, what do you call this? Exponential back off. Like, I'm not sure how you're gonna handle that in Mule. So in the exponential back off is, for example, you've got 500 seconds try. Hello, Jack?
I can hear you.
Oh, that's annoying. I don't know what's happening. Is it my connection? Anyway,
Y- Yes,
so
yes. I think there is some issue at your end, basically. Yeah.
yeah, what was the last statement that
So
I
yeah,
was
just
saying?
discussing about business exception and technical exception. Like,
Yeah, so the business exception, put that in poison queue, and then check what went wrong with that message, and then do the message replay or reprocess the message. And then the technical exception should go to dead letter queue. So the technical exception, you have to do a retry and put that in the dead letter queue because there's no point of retrying once it gets exhausted. And then what I was saying with the retries, Jack, is, for example, you've got
Joy, can you share your screen? I cannot see. We can.
hang on, sorry. All right. Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, so what I was saying with the technical exception, so for example, you keep on retrying. You've got 500 seconds in between of retries. And then there's an outage from the downstream. I mean, there's no sense of retrying, right? If the outage is like an hour. So there's no concept of or I just don't know if there's a concept of exponential back off in Mule, wherein, for example, okay, I'll try it first in first 15 minutes and then 30, 45, and so on. Because it's always fixed. It's always fixed. The time is always fixed. But again, if the issue is like an outage, there's no point of keep on trying between 500 milliseconds or whatever because there's an outage. Yeah, I don't know what's your thoughts around that, guys, but yeah, I was waiting, for that mechanism of exponential back off in you.
Yeah, it's true.
Mm. Alrighty. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, one question, Joy.
Yep, sure.
Can we recover the message from pause and queue?
Can you return?
Can you recover the message from pause and queue?
Yes, so it's gonna be in it's a normal queue. It's a normal queue. Let's just call it poison queue. So you could check because that's the intention of poison queue, right? You'll have to check what went wrong to that message. Yes, the answer is yes.
Okay, thank you.
Alrighty. Anything else, guys? Yeah. So like what I've said, the key takeaway for this is we'll have to use this integration patterns whenever we're designing a solution, because this is our formula and we could leverage it to successfully connect data, application systems, and devices. All right, so we're almost done. If you have any more questions in the future, feel free to reach out through any of my channels. I'm happy to answer your questions, or you could ask now. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you so much. Any more questions, guys? Yes, Jackie's uploading the slide and the video as well.
Yeah, you will get it, Kishore.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks, Joy. It was great session. Like it gave a lot of insights about API-led connectivity. Like what are the different patterns we can use with the API-led connectivity. So it was a great session. Like it will like I think it's very useful also because we need to use such kind of scenario in our daily in our daily projects and all those things. Like
Mhm.
we come across a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, Anurag, you will get recording everything.
Yeah, and it's very important to know this, most especially when you are transitioning from the development to architecture in Mule. You know what I mean? Like it would really help you a lot in the
Yeah.
solution design.
So there's one question: what is difference between integration pattern and styles? Basically, yeah, this is see integration patterns are predefined. Like so see it's predefined when I say like there are some set of rules we define with integration pattern. Like we have a scatter gather, we have a content based routing, we have a message routing. So we know like what we have to do in those kind of integration pattern, right? But styles is comes with the architectural styles. We have a microservices like. We have a API led connectivity, we have a different things, right? So for styles we don't have any predefined protocol, or like we don't have a strict rules like we have to implement in that xyz ways or something like that, right? And this is more towards the architecture, basically styles, right, Joy? So
Yep.
styles will more towards the architecture, and like you can within the styles you can implement a different integration pattern. Like you have defined like API led connectivity, I want to use the architecture style as a API led connectivity. Within that API led connectivity you can use like message routing, you can use saga pattern, you can use orchestration pattern, you can use choreograph pattern, anything, right? So style is basically it's come with the architecture and integration pattern you can use within that particular architecture style. But for
Mhm.
architectural styles we don't have any rules and regulation or strict rules we have to follow. Like there is the guidelines given, but you don't have to follow. Like there might be a different way of implementing the API led connectivity, basically. And same thing goes with microservices.
Mhm. Yep. Very well said, Jack.
Yeah, yeah. Correct, Pavan. Yeah. Hi, Siva.
Yeah, I think anything else you wanted to add, Jack?
I think there's a no further question, so I think we can start with quiz. Yeah.
All right. So how are okay, I'm just gonna ask the questions and then they will answer it in the chat. Is that correct?
No, no, no. Like we have set up Kaut basically. So we have
Oh,
something.
okay.
So that will be the easiest way, and it will be useful for other people also. Like people complain a lot about, like, like what the type we are using, right? The way we are using the asking question, people are complaining about that. So we prepare 4 or 5 questions, like Joy. So we will use that Kaut. Okay. So I think Nitish have prepared something, so he can use that
All right.
Kaut.
Yep. I'll leave it to you. Over you, Nitish.
Nitish,
Yeah,
it's you can take it from here, like.
sure, sure. So that can we
So you
close
can
the
on your
recording?
camera, Nitish. You can. Everybody can on the camera. I will not going to on my camera. So because like
Hi,
I
Jack.
my
Where are you
my
hiding?
head got injured basically.
Oh, hope
Yeah,
nothing.
you can see it here basically.
Oh,
Yeah, I got 5 stitches. I got fall down in bathroom basically, and
What?
yeah,
Take care.
yeah. I was lucky to survive basically.
Jack, Rajiv is asking if you can if you could unmute him.
Who? Rajiv. Rajiv is already unmute. Okay, let me unmute it again.
Jackie, can we stop recording now? Yeah.
Yeah, just a minute. Let it be there. No issue. It's fine.
Okay. Okay, fine. No issues. Okay. Good to see everyone.
Hey, Mary.
Guys, good
Okay.
morning.
Morning. How are you?
Good, good, good. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone.
Okay. So I'm sharing my screen. Please confirm once you see the screen.
Good luck, guys.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
see it.
So okay. Uh, yeah. So let me tell you something, a brief about Kahoot. So there'll be a question over here. You can like there will be two screens. One will be your laptop, and you can go with any other laptop or your mobile. So you'll get a question over here. Time will be running out here. You will get options over here, and you need to choose the color as per your answer. Hope it is good for everyone. Like so. Okay, so I'm sharing the pin.
शेयर हो रहा था तो तेरा क्या रहा है
Purchase a license here in Kahoot.
Yes, I think we have to buy the license for that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Hello, Nitish. Can you give the link? Like people are asking for link and pin.
Yeah. Okay, it's already there.
538247, guys.
Just a second.
Can you ping that? Like
Yeah, yeah. It's
538247.
also.
I think. I think.
कौन है रे?
Guys, if you're not speaking, can you please go on mute? Thank you.
So guys, like everybody, after this meetup you will get a link where you can give like feedback for this session, so this will help us in like improving ourselves. And like you can also select what are the topic you are interested in the future presentation, so you can just let us know. And also, if anybody want to become a speaker in upcoming session, he can reach the organizer basically.
Okay, so are we good? Should I log the game and start the quiz?
Just a 2 minute, just people are still, just give a more minutes.
Sure, 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 Jackie.
This is very excited to play.
So what's the maximum players for this license block?
Nitish,
We have
are you aware?
for
It's
this we have
unlimited,
100.
right?
For this we have 100.
Nice.
It's good. Like for last meetup, we haven't used this. We have moved.
Surat
Yesterday we
taking
had
it
one with
to the
300
next
people.
level.
Yeah, Vandan, you are saying something?
Yeah,
Surat,
the
Surat
max
is
limit for
taking it
Kahoot
to
is
the
quite
next
high. You
level.
can use up to 500 people also.
Oh.
But currently, we have took license of 100, right?
Okay, okay, yeah.
Guys, you will get all the details after this meetup. Like once we finish the meetup, you will get all the links and everything over the email.
Okay. Are we good, Jackie? Like, okay, I'm locking the game, Jackie.
Minute,
Oh, okay, sure.
guys, we are locking the game. Like last 1 minute. Like if anybody have any
Sure.
issue, just let us know. Yeah, Nitish, we can lock the game now.
Okay, sure, sure, Jackie. Thanks for confirmation. Okay, now no one else can join. Okay, let me start the game. All the best, guys. Oh, close. Okay, let's see. Okay, Adarsh, Rajiv, and Anurag. Similar answers. Okay, so okay, podium changes. Rajiv, Adarsh, and Nitish.
The answer is IP whitelisting. Generally, if you have an expense layer and it is consumed by mobile, so you cannot use the IP whitelisting policy because in mobile the IP keep on changing.
Right, right, Jackie. Okay, so let's see the podium. Okay, again it changes. Rajiv, Adarsh, and Sumit. Oh, I was expecting like complete wiped out. Okay. Okay. So okay. Same. Oh oh. Okay. Hmm. Super. Oh, guys. Okay. Okay. Last question. Okay. Okay. Let's see the podium. Jackie, please take a snapshot. No.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Congrats, Rajiv, Sumit, and who's on number one? Oh, great. I'm not playing, by the way. Congrats, Nitish.
I thought
Can you
it's
please ping,
you.
or can everybody ping your email ID? Like all the three winners.
Congrats, winners. Okay. Okay, I'm
Just a
stop
minute.
presenting.
I'm taking this snapshot.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I already took it.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm stop sharing. Guys, please share the email address of yours so I can.
I got Nitish. I got Rajiv.
Uh, hey, thanks, Nitish.
There's one more, right? I got Sumit also.
Okay, just a second.
Okay.
So, uh,
So I think we are good. So like somebody has some question, right? I don't know who asked that, but he have some question. Let me check. Manthan, I think, right?
yeah, Manthan asked, Manthan Patil.
I don't think he's in meeting now. So guys, like we haven't take too much of the time today, so we finished it. So we meet up so quickly. So thanks, Joy, for your time and this great session.
No
So if
worries.
anybody,
Thanks, guys.
yeah, yeah, anybody have any question like before we close the meetup, like
Nitish is saying something, Jackie. Sorry to interrupt, Joy. I have one query. API-led connectivity is just a theory, and it should also support coarse grained along with fine grained. Okay, Jackie,
Um.
Joy.
Okay, you go ahead, Jack.
yeah,
Yeah,
it should it should support, but mostly it's safe. We should go with in at least in system layer we go with
Yes.
fine grain basically, right? But
Mhm.
Nitish, you are right. It can go with like generally. See, theoretically it is not. I will say practically is also possible and theoretically is also possible, but generally it is like suggested to go with fine grain or domain design driven kind of
Mhm.
approach for your API led connectivity. So you can enable more and more reusability and
Mhm.
you can create more purposeful APIs basically. Yeah,
Yeah.
see, you can do everything like so you can do anything basically if you want to like create one system API which are connecting to two three system, that is also possible, right, Nitesh? So that
Yeah.
that will become a coarse grain basically.
In particular, the system layer. Yes.
Yeah,
That's covered in platform architecture training.
yeah.
correct.
So they
So
will.
generally,
Mhm.
in system layer, we generally like either you create the system layer in the microservices way, or either you can create the system layer like one system for one, like one system API for one system. So when I
Mm.
say microservices layer, like where we will going to use a domain design, a domain driven design approach. So
Mm.
where like for one system you can have a multiple APIs. So basically one system can generally we create like fine grained system API on the base of business capability, like business capability, right? Or domain driven design approach, where
Mm.
you can have a for one system you can have a multiple system APIs. So
Yes.
how? So basically, like you have a database. That database contain finance data. That database contain HR data. That database contain
Mm.
like procurement data, like lot of data, right? So it contain the different systems or different like business capabilities data, right? So
Yeah.
for that, like for HR system, for HR you can create one system API, or like for finance you can create one system API, for procurement you can create one system API. So generally what you are doing for one system, you are creating three different system API. So that is known as a domain driven design basically. Okay, in some cases, like you in some cases you also create a single system API for one system. So that is mostly kind of a system API where it's work on the single responsibility principle basically,
Mm.
right? So you can implement like in many ways, like it depend, like so there are many ways of implementing it.
Yeah, and to add, because the fine grain APIs, they could you could easily deliver that. Like it's easy the development time, but that again is less reusability. Like there's a less chance for usability. But for the coarse grain, like it's taking time to to
Correct.
develop it. But again, that could be applicable for different you know purposes.
Correct. And it is like I will answer you like previously what we are doing, we are creating the web services, right? Like when we don't have a concept of this API led connectivity and all those things. So
Mm.
we are creating the web services which contain 100 operation, 200 operation, right? So like there can be 100 and 200. That is a mostly a coarse grain kind of approach or monolithic kind of approach. But
Yes.
in API led, like what is happening, like now what we do, like we dividing like the APIs on the basis of system or the business capability, right? So that is
Mm.
how we are doing in API led connectivity or microservices architecture. So in this, what advantage we are getting, like each application or each APIs can run separately basically, like isolated with each other. So once one API got filled, it will not, like other API will not get filled. In case of previous ESB architecture where we are using the web services, soap based services, where there are 200 operation, if one soap services goes down, all 200 operation will go down, right?
Mm.
So those are the advantage we are getting.
And you have to be mindful as well with your V-course consumption.
Correct.
Yeah.
And Jackie, I guess it's course going is like tightly coupled, so API led
Correct.
connectivity is not tightly coupled, so they say like fine grain.
Correct. Correct.
Right? Yeah.
There will be a
So
balance of a lot of things actually. When we talked about domain and a lot of other things, right? So as Jackie mentioned, if somebody is heavy on database side, ERP side, you try to create API specific to that, or you then again come back and say, okay, I'll create something specific to a functionality or specific to a system. But as Mary said, that we have to be mindful. It's not written in stone somewhere that you have to follow this. And
see,
it all
correct.
yeah.
Correct.
Correct,
Siva, you
sure.
are right. So generally, we got lot of question in the interview. What is difference between API-led connectivity and microservices, basically, right? So we generally get this question, right? So generally, see, microservices mostly go with a domain design-driven approach, domain-driven design approach. So where you can have a multiple system API for one system. So you are completely creating the API on the basis of your business capability. Whereas in system API, which MuleSoft advocates API-led connectivity approach, where we have a system API. So for one system, we create one system API, and you can verify whether you have created the right system API. Just check you have only one connection configuration in your like in your that particular system API. So that's a difference between system API and the system API with microservices basically. So
Yeah.
basically, yeah,
Yeah.
And to add to that, again, if I say that I am doing Salesforce, NetSuite maybe, and my major business process is orders, not accounts, I would say, right? So then I would go for a specific API for orders, which will create orders in NetSuite or Salesforce both, right? But if I say that I have accounts, contacts, leads, and everything in Salesforce, then we might create just one application which can handle all three objects, not separate APIs for handling accounts and leads and
Correct.
contacts, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I was gonna say that actually lead for a really good topic of what are the considerations in building system APIs, process APIs, and experience APIs. So anyone wants to volunteer with that topic?
I guess it's a more of a discussion part of topic. We should circle back and we should discuss more and see where we can reach.
Yeah, see, like there are, see, sometimes you get a more question, during, like, we get that question when we are talk, like when we are doing the business requirement gathering and all those things.
Right.
So sometimes there might be possibility we don't require process layer, we directly require system layer and experience layer. Sometimes we may not require experience layer, right? Simply we can create the proxy and we can use that proxy as an experience layer, right? Sometimes, like, there might be possibility we have a non-MuleSoft system API and MuleSoft process API in the experience API. So there are various patterns, like we can keep one session on that. So like myself completely aware of 9 to 10 patterns where, like, we may require two system layers also. That is also possibility. So we may require two system layer. Like you have a non-MuleSoft system layer. On the top of that, you want to implement the MuleSoft system layer basically. So that is the two system layer approach. So there are many things, like as I mentioned, somebody asked me what is difference between architectural styles and the patterns. That is the difference. In architectural style, there is a no there is no proper rules and the proper approach. They have defined like this. These are the three layer, and like it's up to us how we can implement those three layers basically. So that is the architectural style basically.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess we are good now.
Yeah.
Any
Thanks,
further questions?
Siva. Thank you for your thoughts and inputs. So it is really helpful to the people. Like I know like a lot of people confused about this API-led connectivity architectures and all this thing, like when to implement which layer. So yeah. So sometime also I will give one more like case, like where we don't have to use the process layer. So sometimes what happens, like most of the time, if you see your business, if you are using the databases, right? If you are using the legacy databases like Oracle or something like that, right? So in that case, most of your business logic already written in the store procedure of functions and all those things, right? So in that case, you can create the wrapper of the system API. You don't require the process layer also. You can simply expose the experience layer. So that is also one possibility. So if you already have a business logic, why we need to move that business logic to process layer or something like that? So we have already exist business logic in your backend system. We can make use of those business logic also, right? If you see in legacy, we have a common business logic, and implementing those business logic is not that straightforward. So I also came across such kind of scenario where we haven't implemented the process layer. Like we simply implement the system layer, and like all the business logic exists in the store procedure and the functions, and we expose the experience layer.
That is correct.
Okay, so I think it was nice session. Like thanks everybody for your inputs and like your thoughts. So yeah, so we should have this kind of discussion in further meetups. So this is very useful. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you everyone. Bye.
Thanks,
Have a
everyone.
nice
Thank you.
weekend.
Thank
All
Thank you,
right.
everyone.
Bye.
Weekend, guys.
Bye, Joy.
Enjoy
Bye,
the
Bye.
day.
Joy. Thank you for the
Yeah,
great
bye.
session.
Bye everyone. Happy weekend.
Bye, guys.